The twin sons of Zara baked the endless dunes of the crimson wastes into a shimmering furnace. The air so dry it stole moisture from the eyes before tears could even form. Amidst the scorched wreckage of drop pods and shattered hover tanks, Corporal Ronan Vale stirred, his body aching as if every bone had been replaced with molten glass. His neural dampener helmet lay cracked beside him, its HUD flickering a final, useless warning before dying. He remembered the ambush, how his squad had been lured into the Salt Flats Canyon by false distress signals, only to be enveloped by silent, blue-skinned warriors who moved like shadows through the heat haze. Ronan had fought until his pulse rifle overheated, until his knuckles bled from smashing an alien's jaw with the butt of his weapon, until a stun net dropped from nowhere and sent his nervous system into convulsions. Now, his wrists were bound behind his back with flexible energy cuffs that hummed faintly and tightened if he struggled. His boots scraped against hot sand as two figures dragged him unceremoniously toward a cluster of obsidian spires jutting from the dune like black fangs. He lifted his head, blinking sweat and grit from his eyes, and saw her. She stood at the crest of a dune, silhouetted against the blinding glare of Zara's larger sun. Tall, lean, and impossibly poised. Her blue skin shimmered with a faint bioluminescent sheen that caught the light like polished sapphire. Her white hair, long, straight, and threaded with silver filaments that pulsed with energy, flowed behind her as if caught in an invisible wind. Armor of segmented obsidian plates hugged her torso and thighs, leaving her arms and midriff bare, revealing intricate tattoos that coiled like living serpents across her skin, glowing faintly in patterns Ronan didn't understand. She turned slowly, and her eyes, deep violet, slit-pupilled like a desert cat's, locked onto his. Ronan's breath hitched. She was undeniably gorgeous, yes, with high cheekbones and a mouth that might have smiled once upon a time. But there was something in her gaze, a coldness, a patience, that made his gut twist. He'd seen that look before, on apex predators back on Earth when they'd cornered prey too exhausted to run. "Who's the runt?" Ronan croaked, his voice raw. "Looks like you dragged in yesterday's trash." One of his captors, a hulking male with scarred shoulders and tusks jutting from his lower jaw, growled and raised a shock baton. But the blue woman raised a single, long-fingered hand, and the warrior froze instantly, lowering his weapon with a grumble. She descended the dune with fluid grace, each step deliberate, silent. Up close, she was even more striking. Her scent was strange, ozone and something floral, like night-blooming desert lilies after a rare rain. "You speak our tongue," she said, her voice low and musical, yet edged with steel. "How?" Ronan shrugged as best he could with bound arms. "Universal Translator Implant. Standard issue. Helps when you're trying not to accidentally insult a warlord by calling his mother a three-legged lizard." A flicker crossed her features. Amusement? Annoyance? It vanished as quickly as it came. "You are Ronan Vale. Squad 7, 3rd Earth Expeditionary Force. You disabled 4 scout drones and disarmed 3 proximity mines before your squad fell." Ronan's pulse spiked. "And you are?" "Vela," she said simply. Then, with a nod to her warriors, "Bind him to me." Ronan frowned. "Bind me? Like marry me? Because I gotta tell you, I'm flattered, but I'm kind of busy dying right now." Vela didn't smile. She lifted a small device from her belt, sleek, silver, humming softly, and pressed it against his collarbone. A sharp sting, then warmth spread through his chest. He gasped, feeling something shift inside him. A tether, invisible but undeniable. "It is not marriage," she said coolly. "You are now my oath-bound. If I fall in battle, you die. If you flee, I can track you across 3 star systems. If you betray me, the bond will shred your nervous system from within." Ronan stared at her, mouth agape. "You're kidding." Her violet eyes held his without flinching. The Kalari do not joke about blood oaths. For a moment Ronan thought he might laugh or scream. Of all the ways to die, being psychically leashed to a 6-foot-tall alien warrior woman with the emotional warmth of a glacier wasn't on his list. But even as dread pooled in his stomach, something else stirred. Curiosity. Why him? Why not just execute him? Why go through the trouble of binding a lowly human corporal to herself, the apparent leader of this desert war party? The days that followed were a blur of heat, thirst, and relentless marching. Vela led her warriors deep into the wastes, toward the fabled Obsidian Citadel, the last stronghold of the Kalari rebels, or so rumor claimed. Ronan, bound at the wrist to Vela's belt by a thin, unbreakable cord woven from starlight fibers, trudged beside her like a stray dog on a leash. He tried to lighten the mood with jokes. So, do you come here often? Just casually binding prisoners to yourself? Or, if I compliment your hair, will the bond make me burst into flames? But Vela remained aloof, responding only when necessary, her voice clipped and precise. Yet Ronan noticed things. How she always gave him the larger portion of dried lizard meat at night. How she'd subtly shift her body to block the worst of the sandstorms from hitting him. How once, when he stumbled from heat exhaustion, she caught him before he hit the ground, her touch surprisingly gentle, and poured water from her own canteen into his mouth. "You're not what I expected," he muttered one evening as they camped beneath a sky swarming with alien constellations. "And what did you expect?" she asked, sharpening a curved dagger on a whetstone. "Someone angrier, crueler." She paused, then looked up. "Cruelty is wasteful. Precision is power." Ronan studied her. "Then why bind me? You could have killed me, or left me to the scorpions." Vela's gaze drifted to the horizon, where distant explosions lit the night like thunderless lightning. "Because you disarmed the mind that would have killed my youngest warrior. You didn't know she was there. You did it anyway." Ronan blinked. He hadn't even realized. The truth he'd learn later was far more complex. Vela wasn't just a warrior. She was the last heir of the Kalari royal bloodline, a lineage thought extinct after the Emperor's purge. The Empire believed her dead. Her warriors were all that remained of a once proud civilization now reduced to desert ghosts. And Ronan? He was leverage. A human soldier bound to her would confuse Imperial trackers. Their scanners couldn't distinguish human life signs from Kalari when the oath bond was active. She needed him as camouflage, but she hadn't counted on his stubborn kindness, his refusal to be cowed, his infuriating habit of humming Earth songs under his breath. Their journey grew more perilous. Imperial drones swarmed the skies, sandworms, massive, burrowing predators with crystalline teeth, attacked twice, forcing Ronan and Vela to fight back-to-back. During the second attack, Ronan took a glancing blow to the ribs protecting her flank. She carried him for hours afterward, her expression unreadable, but her grip firm, protective. "You're heavier than you look," she'd grunted. "And you're softer than you pretend," he'd shot back, wincing. Something like a smile touched her lips then, just for a heartbeat. When they finally reached the obsidian citadel, it wasn't a fortress of stone, but a living structure grown from black coral and infused with ancient tech, pulsing with soft internal light. Inside, warriors bowed as Vela passed, their eyes flicking to Ronan with suspicion and disbelief. But no one challenged her. That night, in her private chamber, a circular room lined with floating crystals and maps of shifting starfields, Vela finally told him the truth. "The Empire is hunting me," she said, standing by a window that overlooked the endless dunes. "They believe I possess the heart of Kale, a relic that can awaken our dormant war machines. But the heart was destroyed generations ago. All I have is a name. And now you." Ronan sat on a low stone bench, rubbing his bruised ribs. "So I'm just a decoy." "You are more," she said quietly. "You chose to save a life you didn't know was there. That is rare, even among my people." He looked up at her. "What happens now?" "We prepare," she said. "The Empire will attack at dawn. They've tracked us." Ronan exhaled, then stood. "Then I guess I'd better get my hands on a decent rifle." Vela turned fully to him now, her white hair catching the glow of the crystals. "The bond means if you die, I die," he finished. "So let's not die." She studied him for a long moment. Then, for the first time, she extended her hand, not to bind, but to offer. Ronan took it. Her skin was cool, her grip strong. The battle came sooner than expected. Just past midnight, alarms wailed through the citadel, sonic pulses that vibrated in the bones. Imperial dropships darkened the sky, their engines roaring like angry gods. Vela moved like lightning, barking orders, strapping on heavier armor, her tattoos flaring bright violet with combat adrenaline. Ronan, armed with a plasma rifle that felt alien but responsive in his hands, stood beside her on the ramparts. "You stay behind me," she ordered. "Not a chance," he said. "I'm your insurance policy, remember? Gotta keep you alive." She didn't argue. The fighting was chaos. Blinding energy bolts, shrieking warriors, the ground trembling under artillery fire. Ronan fought with desperate precision, using Earth tactics the Kalari had never seen. Feints, traps, using the citadel's reflective surfaces to blind enemies. Vela was a whirlwind of death, her twin blades humming as they carved through Imperial soldiers. But then a new threat. A dreadnought-class war mech descended, towering over the citadel, its main cannon charging with a high-pitched whine. "It's targeting the core," one warrior shouted. "If it fires, the whole citadel collapses." Vela's face went pale. "The core houses our archives, our history." Ronan looked at the mech, then at Vela. He remembered her words. "Cruelty is wasteful. Precision is power." "I have an idea," he said, "but I'll need a lift." She understood instantly. Without hesitation, she grabbed him under the arms and, using a surge of her enhanced strength, launched him toward a nearby spire. Ronan scrambled up, heart pounding, and leapt onto the mech's shoulder as it turned its massive head. He jammed his plasma rifle into the sensor array and fired point-blank. Sparks exploded. The mech staggered. But it wasn't enough. Then Vela was there, scaling the mech like a climber on a cliff, her blades plunging into joints, her movements a dance of lethal grace. She reached the cockpit, pried it open with bare hands, and dragged the pilot out into the night. The mech powered down, crashing to its knees. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of dying fires. Ronan slid down the mech's arm, landing hard on the ground. Vela dropped beside him, breathing heavily, her armor scorched, a cut bleeding across her temple. She looked at him, really looked at him, and something in her eyes had changed. The coldness was gone, replaced by something warmer, something vulnerable. "You could have run," she said softly. "I'm bound to you," he replied, grinning through split lips. "Besides, who else is going to tell your terrible jokes?" She didn't laugh. Instead, she reached out and touched his cheek, her fingers trembling slightly. "The bond. It can be more than a leash, Ronan." He stilled. "What do you mean?" "In Kalari tradition," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "an oathbound who proves their heart true may choose to make the bond permanent, not just in life, but in home, in family." Ronan's breath caught. He'd seen the way she looked at the children in the Citadel's lower levels, the way her expression softened. He'd heard whispers that Kalari women, especially of royal blood, could bear offspring with compatible species, though few ever tried. And now, standing in the wreckage of battle, covered in ash and blood, he realized something terrifying and beautiful. He didn't want to leave. Before he could answer, a new sound echoed across the dunes. Not of war, but of music, distant, haunting, carried on the wind. Vela's eyes widened. "The Star Caravan," she breathed. "They've come." Ronan frowned. "Who?" "The nomads, the keepers of the peace accords. They only appear when a bloodline is in danger of extinction or rebirth." As the first lights of the caravan crested the horizon, glowing skiffs shaped like crescent moons, trailing banners of living silk, Vela turned fully to Ronan. The violet in her eyes glowed softly, matching the rhythm of his own heartbeat through their bond. "What do you say, human?" she asked, a ghost of a smile finally breaking through. "Shall we see what tomorrow brings?" Ronan looked from the caravan to her face, to the citadel behind them, to the endless desert that had tried to kill him a dozen times over. He thought of kindness in a harsh world, of choosing to protect rather than destroy, of finding home in the unlikeliest of places. He took her hand. "Lead the way, Vela." And as the twin suns began to rise, painting the crimson wastes in gold and rose, the last heir of the Kalari and the human soldier who'd bound himself to her fate walked toward the future, not as prisoner and captor, but as something new, something uncharted, something worth fighting for. The Star Caravan did not arrive in peace. As Ronan and Vela stepped forward to meet the glowing crescent skiffs, a tremor ran through the dunes, not from artillery, but from something far older. The sand beneath their feet rippled like water, and with a sound like tearing silk, the ground split open. From the fissure rose not warriors, but something far stranger. Figures clad in flowing robes woven from starlight and shadow, their faces obscured by masks shaped like crescent moons. But these were not the peaceful envoys Vela had expected. "The Caravan of Ash," she whispered, her voice tight with dread. "They were purged centuries ago." One of the figures stepped forward, taller than the rest, his robes shimmering with the captured light of dead stars. When he spoke, his voice echoed as if from 1,000 throats at once. "Vela of House Kalari, you carry the last spark of your bloodline, and you have defiled it with an outsider. Ronan moved instinctively in front of her. She hasn't defiled anything. She's kept her people alive while your so-called empire turned this world into a graveyard. The figure tilted his head. The human speaks with fire, but fire burns out. He raised a hand, and the sand around them began to swirl, not from wind, but from unseen energy. The true caravan was destroyed. We are what remains, those who chose survival over sentiment. We serve the Emperor now, and your bond, little human, is a flaw in the bloodline. It must be excised. Vela's tattoos flared violet, her stance shifting into a battle-ready crouch. You betrayed the code of stars. And you, the ash speaker hissed, betrayed your duty by letting a human touch the royal thread. Before Ronan could react, the ground beneath him liquefied. He sank waist-deep into quicksand infused with nanites. Tiny machines that began crawling up his legs, seeking his neural ports. He cried out, not from pain, but from the sudden, invasive probing in his mind. The bond with Vela flared white-hot, a searing thread of panic and fury linking them. Vela screamed, not in rage, but in terror. Don't let them sever it. She lunged not at the ash speaker but at Ronan. Her hand clamped around his wrist just as the nanites reached his spine. Energy crackled between them, the oath bond surging outward in a pulse of violet-blue light. The nanites shrieked and disintegrated. The dune hardened again, solid as stone. But the victory was short-lived. From the skiffs emerged armored enforcers. Kalari, but twisted, their blue skin marred with black grafts, their eyes glowing crimson. Cyborgs, the Emperor's new weapons. Among them strode a woman. Tall, regal, her white hair streaked with silver, her face hauntingly familiar. Mother, Vela gasped. The woman smiled, but it held no warmth. Daughter, you survived longer than I expected. Ronan's stomach dropped. Your mother works for the Empire? Vela's voice was barely a whisper. She was declared dead in the purge. I saw her fall. You saw what I allowed you to see, the woman said, stepping forward. I made a choice. Better to rule in hell than die for a dead god. The Empire offered me power, immortality, and in return, I gave them everything, including you. The betrayal struck Vela like a physical blow. She staggered back, her tattoos dimming. Ronan caught her before she fell. You were bait, he realized aloud. They used you to draw out the last loyalists. Precisely. The Empress, no, the traitor said, folding her arms. And now, with you both here, the last thread of rebellion ends. The bond between you is unstable. If we extract the human's biosignature, Vela's royal genome will stabilize under Imperial control. She will become the perfect vessel, a living weapon with no will of her own. Ronan tightened his grip on Vela's hand. Not happening. The Empress sighed, almost pityingly. You think this is about love? About destiny? This biology, boy. She is Kalari royalty. Her body was designed to carry heirs of war. And you? You're just a spark that lit a fuse never meant to burn. Then she raised her hand. The cyborg warriors advanced. But Vela did not cower. Slowly, she straightened, her violet eyes blazing. You taught me one truth, mother, she said, her voice steady now. Precision is power. She slammed her palm against the citadel's outer wall. The black coral responded instantly, veins of light racing through its surface. Deep within the structure, something awakened. Not a war machine, but a seed vault. A sanctuary. The ground trembled again, but this time with life, not destruction. From the dunes sprouted crystalline flowers, their petals unfolding to reveal dormant drones. Not for war, but for preservation. They swarmed the ash caravan, not attacking, but scanning, uploading data at blinding speed. What is this? The Empress snarled. The heart of Kale was never a weapon, Vela said, her voice ringing with newfound authority. It was a library, a genetic arc, and you just triggered its final protocol. The drones converged on Ronan. He flinched, expecting pain, but instead warmth flooded his veins. The bond with Vela shifted, deepened. He felt her memories, her childhood under twin moons, her mother's lullabies before the purge, her silent vow to protect every last Kalari child. And she felt his Earth's blue skies, his squad's laughter before the ambush. The moment he chose to disarm that mind not for strategy, but because someone might be there. The ash speaker staggered. The bond, it's rewriting itself. It's becoming symbiotic. Impossible, the Empress shouted. Human DNA can't interface with royal Kalari genome. It can? Vela said, stepping forward, Ronan beside her, their hands still clasped. When both hearts choose the same future, the citadel began to rise. Not collapsing, but unfolding like a blooming flower. Towering spires of living crystal pierced the sky, forming a shield of refracted light that scattered the Imperial skiff's weapons fire. The desert itself seemed to rally to them, sand forming barriers, winds howling in a protective gale. But the true twist came not from battle but from memory. One of the children from the citadel's lower levels, a small girl with blue skin and bright eyes, ran forward, clutching a data orb. Lady Vela, the archive. It showed something about the human bond. Vela knelt, taking the orb. As she touched it, images flooded her mind. Ancient texts, prophetic verses. When the sky bleeds and the sands weep, a stranger's hand shall rouse the deep. Not blood, but choice, shall crown the line, and peace shall bloom where war was thine. Ronan read it over her shoulder. So, I'm the stranger? You're more than that, Vela whispered, looking up at him, tears glistening in her violet eyes. The old texts say Kalari royalty lost the ability to choose love after the Gene Wars. We were bred for duty, not desire. But the prophecy, it speaks of a bond formed not by bloodline but by choice. And that bond, it can restore the full Kalari genome. Not as weapons but as healers, as builders. The Empress laughed bitterly. Fairy tales to comfort the doomed. But then, something extraordinary happened. From the horizon, new ships appeared. Not imperial, not ash, but sleek and silver, bearing the sigil of the free colonies. Human ships. Ronan's eyes widened. That's my fleet. But they were decimated in the ambush. Not all. A voice crackled over his cracked comm. It was Lieutenant Mara Chen. His second in command, presumed dead. We faked our deaths. Followed your bio-tracker. Took us weeks to navigate the EM storms. But, her voice broke. We weren't leaving you behind, Ronan. The Empress's face twisted in fury. You brought humans into our sacred war? No, Vela said, rising to her full height, Ronan at her side. We're ending it. What followed wasn't a battle, it was a reckoning. The human ships unleashed an EMP pulse, not to destroy, but to disable the cyborg enforcer's neural implants. Freed from control, the augmented Kalari warriors collapsed, many weeping as centuries of programming shattered. The Ash speaker tried to flee, but the desert itself seemed to reject him. The sands swallowed his skiff whole, leaving only silence. The Empress stood alone. Vela approached her, not with a blade, but with open hands. Come home, mother. The war is over. For a long moment, the traitor queen stared at her daughter. Then, slowly, the crimson glow in her eyes faded. She sank to her knees. I thought power was the only way to survive. Survival without purpose, Vela said gently, is just waiting to die. In the days that followed, the Obsidian Citadel became something new, a bridge between species. Human medics treated wounded Kalari. Kalari engineers helped repair human ships using biotech that grew metal like bone. Ronan, still bound to Vela, but now by mutual vow, not oath, found himself mediating disputes, sharing Earth recipes. Spicy bean stew became a surprising hit, and teaching Kalari children how to whistle with blade grass. And one evening, as the twin suns dipped below the dunes, Vela led Ronan to the highest spire of the citadel. Below them, humans and Kalari worked side by side, rebuilding not just structures but trust. I never believed in the prophecy, she admitted, leaning against him. Not until I saw you give your last canteen to that wounded scout. Not because he was Kalari, just because he was thirsty. Ronan smiled. Guess I'm full of surprises. She turned to him, her white hair glowing in the twilight, her violet eyes soft. The bond can be made permanent, you know, legally, culturally, in every way that matters. You mean marriage? If you're not too scared of brides who can bench press a hover tank. He laughed, then grew serious. Vela, your people need you. Your mother's trying to atone. The kids look up to you. I'm just a corporal with a bad sense of direction and an even worse haircut. She cupped his face in her hands. You are the one who taught us that strength isn't in how hard you strike, but in how gently you choose to hold what matters. Down in the courtyard, a group of Kalari elders approached, followed by human officers. Among them was Lieutenant Chun, holding a small data tablet. The free colonies recognize the Kalari sovereignty, she announced. And they've approved a special request. Ronan raised an eyebrow. What request? Vela's smile widened. An interspecies union, first of its kind. They say it might set a precedent for peace across the sector. Ronan looked at her, at the warrior, the heir, the woman who'd gone from binding him as a shield to standing beside him as an equal. He thought of the desert that had tried to kill him, the bond that had saved them both, and the future blooming like those crystalline flowers in the sand. He took her hand. Then I guess I'd better learn how to braid that hair for the ceremony. She laughed, a real, bright sound that echoed across the crimson wastes, chasing away the last ghosts of war. And as the stars emerged one by one, watching over a world reborn, Ronan Vale and Vela of House Kalari began building not just a life together, but a legacy. For in the heart of the desert, where fire once ruled, something far more dangerous had taken root. Hope, and it was growing fast. The wedding was held not in a palace, nor on a battlefield, but in the heart of the crimson wastes, where their story had truly begun. 3 moons hung low over the dunes. Zara's twin sons had set, and the third moon, Ayla, long thought barren, had cracked open during the final battle to reveal a hidden ecosystem of bioluminescent flora, pulsing gently like a heartbeat beneath the sand. It was there, in a natural amphitheater of rose quartz dunes and glowing crystal vines, that humans and Kalari gathered side by side, their weapons laid to rest, their differences stitched together by shared survival. Ronan wore a uniform reforged from salvaged battle armor and human ceremonial cloth, deep blue, stitched with silver thread that matched Vela's hair. At his side stood Lieutenant Chun as his bond witness, her eyes glistening with pride. Vela, radiant beyond words, wore robes woven from living silk spun by desert moths, her white hair braided with filaments of starlight that shimmered in time with her calm, steady breaths. Tattoos that once glowed only in combat now pulsed with soft gold. A sign, the elders said, of a soul at peace. The officiant was not a general, nor a priest, but the small Kalari girl who'd once brought the prophecy orb, now named Lyra, after the word for bridge in the old tongue. She stood before them barefoot in the warm sand, holding a single crystalline blossom plucked from the newly awakened dunes. In the days of ash, she recited, her voice clear as wind chimes. 2 hearts walked alone, one bound by duty, one by chance. But when the sky broke and the earth wept, they chose not to flee, but to stand. Together, she turned to Ronan. Human, you had every reason to hate, yet you offered water before war. Then to Vela. Warrior, you were taught to conquer, yet you learned to cradle. She placed the blossom in their joined hands. By the stars that witnessed your bond, by the sands that tested your will, by the children who now dream without fear, you are no longer oath-bound by law, but soul-bound by choice. Speak your vows. Ronan looked into Vela's violet eyes and smiled. I don't have fancy words, but I promise this. I'll never let you carry the weight alone. If the world tries to break you, I'll be the shield you didn't ask for, but always needed. And if you ever forget how kind you are beneath all that strength, I'll remind you, every day. Vela's voice trembled only once, just at the start. Ronan Vale, you walked into my war and brought peace without firing a single shot at me. You saw my scars and called them stories, my rage and called it protection, my loneliness, and filled it not with noise, but with presence. She squeezed his hand. I vow to build a home with you, not just of stone and starlight, but of laughter, of late-night debates about earth music, of teaching our children to fight only when necessary, and to love always. A murmur of awe rippled through the crowd. For in Kalari tradition, the word our children, spoken in a vow was sacred confirmation that their biologies, once thought incompatible, had not only harmonized but flourished. The genetic arc beneath the citadel had confirmed it. Their union carried the potential for new life, hybrid, resilient, and full of promise. As the final vow settled into the warm night air, the crystalline blossom in their hands unfurled fully, releasing a shower of luminous spores that rose like fireflies into the sky. The dunes responded. Flowers bloomed where none had grown in centuries, their petals reflecting colors unseen by human or Kalari eyes until now. It was said later that the very DNA of the planet had shifted, welcoming the union as a turning point in its long, scarred history. After the ceremony, the celebration lasted 3 nights. Human soldiers danced with Kalari warriors under strings of floating lanterns. Children, human and Kalari alike, chased glowing sand lizards through the ruins-turned gardens of the citadel. Ronan, slightly tipsy on fermented cactus nectar, which tasted like burnt cinnamon and joy, tried to teach Vela how to two-step. She, in turn, showed him the Kalari Sky Song, a harmonic chant that made the stars above pulse in rhythm. They laughed until their sides ached, until the last embers of the bonfire dimmed to gold. And when the guests finally drifted off to their tents and hoverpods, Ronan and Vela walked alone to the edge of the oasis that had sprung up around the citadel. A spring fed by underground rivers long thought dried up. "I used to dream of this place covered in ash," Vela said softly, leaning her head on his shoulder. "And now it's full of life," Ronan replied. "Funny how things work out." She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the twin moons. "Do you ever regret it? Being bound to me?" He kissed her forehead. Then her lips, slow, sure, full of everything words couldn't hold. "Regret? Vela, I was lost the moment I stepped onto this planet. You didn't just save me, you gave me a reason to stay." Years later, their home stood at the center of a thriving colony, half human ingenuity, half Kalari bioarchitecture, where starships came not to conquer, but to trade, learn, and share stories. The Obsidian Citadel was no longer a fortress, but a university, a hospital, a cradle of peace. And in their garden, beneath a tree grown from that first crystalline blossom, Ronan rocked their youngest child. A boy with blue-tinged skin, white gold curls, and human eyes the color of Earth's oceans, while Vela read to their twin daughters, who already argued over who would pilot the family skiff first. War had once defined them, but love had rewritten their fate. And as the twin suns rose over a desert no longer crimson with blood, but green with hope, Ronan Vale and Vela of House Kalari knew this was the happy ending they'd fought for. Not just marriage, not just peace, but a future, blooming wildly, beautifully, together. Years melted like desert glass under twin suns, and their love grew not quieter, but louder, echoing through laughter-filled halls and starlit nurseries. Ronan and Vela had not just one child, but 7, each a miracle of 2 worlds woven into one flesh. Their eldest daughter, Serial, inherited Vela's warrior grace and Ronan's stubborn wit. Their youngest son, Joran, could disarm a plasma mine by age 6 and charm Kalari elders with earth lullabies. The house overflowed with scraped knees, glowing tattoos forming on tiny arms, homework in 3 languages, and midnight snack raids led by giggling hybrids who shimmered faintly in the dark. Neighbors whispered in awe, not of their power, but their joy. Ronan still burned toast every morning. Vela still pinned intruders to the wall if they startled the babies. Their garden bloomed with earth roses and Zarian night bells. Their library shelves groaned with comic books and ancient star charts. And every evening, without fail, they gathered under the open sky. Parents and children, human and Kalari, whole and holy. No empire rose to challenge them. No war dared cross their threshold. For peace, they'd learned, wasn't the absence of battle, but the presence of belonging. And as their children chased fireflies through fields where tanks once roared, Ronan would squeeze Vela's hand and grin. "Still think binding me was a good idea?" She'd smile, eyes bright with a lifetime of love, and whisper, "Best decision I ever made." And in that desert, once red with blood, now green with life, their family thrived loud, chaotic, and endlessly, perfectly happy.